Come back to another episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast. As always, my name is Adam, along with my co-host Ben, and we got a good one for you guys today. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you? How was your Christmas, and what are you looking forward to for New Year's?
Yeah, man, doing really good. Had a nice Christmas. It was very low key this year. My mom, my dad, my sister, my girlfriend, and my grandma. It was a nice and mellow, relaxing Christmas, which I think was needed for our family. So nice to have some decent weather too, and not have to be fighting the storms and the blizzards to get to different parties and that kind of stuff. So, what about you? Two kids, teenage age kids. I bet you guys had a fun Christmas.
Yeah, great Christmas. It was fun spending a lot of time with family. Really cherished those moments. Getting the family together to spend that time, and looking forward to 2024.
You guys do Christmas on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve?
Christmas Day. Yeah.
Cool. My girlfriend's family, they all do it on Christmas Eve, which was a little different. So nice to be able to enjoy two Christmases this year, which was fun.
Yeah, fun.
And yeah, man, definitely looking forward to 2024, man. It's crazy. It's less than a week away. We've got New Year's Day on the 1st here in 3 days on Monday. So another year, checking it off the book. Man, I cannot believe, just saying 2024 just is pretty crazy, man. I know how old a lot of our listeners are, but just you and I just graduating high school in 2001 and just thinking about, the Y2K and just how that does not seem like a quarter of a century away or ago practically, which is nuts.
I mean, that's what's so astounding. We are already a quarter or 25% of the way through this century. I mean, think about that. And life is happening. Life is happening right now. It's happening every day. And that is why we all need to be intentional. We all need to live with intention, be present with our friends, with our family, with our business, and live a life with purpose.
That's awesome, man. I couldn't agree more. And that's something that I'm really focusing on as one of my big goals for this next year is just being a little bit more intentional and just appreciating life and not getting so caught up in the Joneses and, just what's really important in life, just really having a little bit better sense of that and taking time out of every day, every week, every month to, like you're saying, be intentional about making time for family, friends, getting outside, enjoying, why we live in such a great state here in Colorado. So
yeah, and
got a lot
I'll
of
just add
exciting
on to that
stuff
really
coming
quick.
up.
I know that you have some exciting things that you want to ask and talk about, but learning to really truly not care about the opinions of others, it is so freeing, so empowering, and what it does is it allows you to hold on to your control and hold on to your power. Um, I really didn't develop that until my late 30s about not caring about the opinion of others. But man, when you can get there, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, even teenagers, get to that point, and it is so freeing.
You've been trying to kind of instill that in both of your kids, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and one lesson that I'm teaching them is that it doesn't matter what you do, whether you have incredible accomplishments or you fail, or if you're a failure, athletically, academically, socially, as a person, whatever you do, something great or something terrible, you are always going to have your critics. People are always going to be critical of you, no matter what you do. So I'm trying to get them to understand that, and so they're not looking for the validation of others, and so they can focus on the process, on their life, on their daily habits, and really win at life according to them. And it's so true, man. It doesn't matter what we do. People are always going to be critical. You're always going to have your haters, whether you're winning or losing. So you may as well just go live the life you want and pursue the life you want.
Love that, man. It's very well said. So, for today's episode, you guys, we're going to talk about somewhat of a polarizing individual and a topic that he's very passionate about. And that individual is Dave Ramsey. And Dave Ramsey's, first and foremost, a very, very successful radio host. He's been doing a syndicated radio show since I think it was back in like the 2005, maybe even before that, to be honest. I unfortunately haven't fact checked that date when he started his Dave Ramsey show. I've seen him live. I went out in maybe it's probably about maybe 10 years ago now and saw him speak for an evening. And he's definitely a very inspiring, motivating person, but he is also somebody that is very, I guess, what would the right word be? His opinion is very different from a lot of the other very prominent social media and just financial influencers out there today. People like Grant Cardone, as well as very well-known people like Warren Buffett. So,
Yeah.
Ben, you have a great YouTube channel where you feature different videos every week, and I think one reason why we wanted to do this topic today is because you actually released a new video yesterday on this same topic. So tell us a little bit about the video that you filmed and released yesterday and kind of give the viewers and the listeners a little bit more insight onto what that's all about.
Yeah, I decided I wanted to do a video on Dave Ramsey. And, first of all, I respect Dave Ramsey. I respect his mission. And he is right for the vast majority of Americans. A lot of people, especially here in America, we've been trained that when you earn $1, you want to go spend $2. And that's just because of how our American economy works. It's based off of consumerism. It's based off of spending. And your average American is not financially disciplined. They lack financial control. They don't have the ability to, really manage their budget, manage their spending. And so someone like Dave Ramsey is appropriate for the vast majority of Americans. A lot of Americans, frankly, just need to be told what to do with their money because they don't have the maturity and the emotional discipline to manage their money correctly. So they need someone like Dave who can say, you need to do this, don't do this, avoid this, and make sure you're doing this. However, when it comes to mortgage, I believe that Dave has a lot of, his philosophy is no longer practical in 2023 as we move into 2024, considering, where interest rates are at, where home values are at. And there's really three main points on the video where I break down, and I believe Dave is wrong. And it's so interesting. The video just launched, and it's coming up on 1,500 views. Just here in the first couple of hours, and there are so many comments already that are just so polarizing and triggering. And so you can tell that this is a very emotional topic, and we've really struck a nerve here with a lot of the viewers.
So just elaborate a little bit about what that exactly philosophy that he has is. So it's obviously related to debt, but what is his philosophy on that?
Yeah. In the video, I discussed three main points. So point number one is, Dave believes that whenever you have a mortgage, you should always do a 15-year fixed. And I argue that that's not appropriate, that the 30-year fixed is a much better product for really everyone, regardless if you're purchasing a home as a primary residence, if it's a second home, if it's an investment property. So that's point number one. Point number two is that you don't need to have a 20% down payment. Dave is also very adamant on always wanting to put 20% down. And in the video, I share a personal story from when I bought my first home back in 2010. That's really, really powerful. And then point number three is that conventional private mortgage insurance is not the end of the world. There's a lot of different ways to handle that if you are putting less than 20% down. And so these are things that, being in the mortgage world, I am really an expert on, and I don't see Dave or, educating his listeners on some of these topics. And, my goal for every customer that I work with is I want to empower them and let them know what their options are. Lay that out so they can make an informed financial decision based off of their financial facts, and then move forward with confidence based off of what they decide. And but yeah, the three things: the 20-year or the 30-year fixed versus the 15-year fixed. You don't need a 20% down payment, and then the conventional private mortgage insurance. And I'm glad to expand on any of those if you'd like me to.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, just so maybe people that haven't bought a home before, just so they understand, I mean, those are really the only two terms available for a mortgage, correct? 15 and 30. There might be occasionally a creative, option outside of that, but I mean, 99% of home loans are one of those two, correct? And what do you think the percentage of 30-year is over 15? Are 15s very common?
With all of the loans that I originate, I would say the vast majority are on a 30-year term. Now, technically, most lenders will offer a 20-year product as well. It's kind of in between the 15 and the 30-year. But you're right. Typically, someone will either do a 30-year or they will do a 15-year. But from my personal experience and going back several years, I mean, the vast majority of loans that I've originated, that's hundreds, if not thousands of loans over the past 5 years. I would say 98% are on a 30-year term.
So I mentioned earlier about, some of these other very prominent, well esteemed financial people such as Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett's take on this is obviously very different, and his reasoning behind that is what he calls the opportunity cost of money. So rather than, putting in, for example, a 20% down payment and being very cash poor, meaning all of your money is tied up into this mortgage, his argument is that with, for example, doing a 5% down instead of 20%, with that additional 15%, whatever that dollar amount were to be, what opportunity costs do you have with that money to make it work for you and potentially, generate more money in a different way? So maybe talk a little bit about that as far as just, your feeling on Warren Buffett's take on that, and if you agree with that or what you feel about that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Warren Buffett, as a matter of fact, and for those of you that don't know, he's considered the most successful investor of all time. Has a super super high net worth. Has been the richest individual in the world. Did not inherit his wealth; he built that on his own. But in 2017, in an interview with CNBC, he came out and stated that the 30-year fix was the most powerful debt instrument available on the market to consumers. And there's a couple different reasons for that. And kind of going back to your point about Dave Ramsey and the 15-year fixed, the reason that Dave is an advocate for the 15-year fix is because when you look at the numbers, the amount of interest that you pay is going to be significantly less than what you pay on the 30-year fixed. Now, what Dave doesn't always talk about or emphasize is the actual monthly payment. If the loan is amortized over 15 years versus 30 years, you're going to be paying substantially more on the 15-year versus the 30-year. And, one of Warren Buffett's points is that with the role of inflation, including wage inflation, meaning that over time wages will rise, that even though you're paying more on the 30-year fixed, you're not actually paying for it. Inflation is paying for it. So your salary today that you're getting is going to go up with inflation. And over time, that mortgage payment, as long as it's on a fixed rate, will be subsidized. The interest cost will be subsidized or completely offset through future wage increases. And so that's one of Warren's big arguments. One of my big arguments for the 30-year is you have so much more flexibility. Dave will, he's really wants that 15-year, but when you're on the 30-year, this is what I always say, you still have the option to pay the loan off in 15 years. You're allowed to make additional principal payments. You have more flexibility and you have more options. And so the reason that I'm such a big advocate for the 30-year is because the payment is going to be significantly less, but you're still allowed to pay more. So, me personally, I'm on a 30-year on most of my mortgages, from my primary residence to my investment properties. And I will make additional principal payments because I know that when I do that, the amount of interest that I'm paying is going to be significantly less. But when something comes up, or if there's a huge expense like the air conditioning goes out, or if I have to replace a roof, and a lot of that has happened this year, I'm not stuck and obligated into the higher monthly payment. So I'm in control. I have much more flexibility. And that's my whole point. When you're on the 30-year, you have more control and more flexibility, and you have the opportunity to do all these other things, which is Warren's point.
Yeah, and even thinking through just the, how well can you sleep at night as far as just, if you're doing a 15-year and you have a really high monthly payment and you're really stretched thin on what you can afford each month, and you lose your job, or you have something come up that's unexpected where you have new expenses that you weren't expecting, the ability to have that cushion and not be,
Mhm.
up against the wall, and, just thinking through just the outside of the physical, the actual dollar amount of this stuff, just the mental, just, again, just like being able to sleep at night and just not having so much anxiety with, worrying about making those payments if something does come up. So that's, yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's
just
exactly
to,
right.
and just so people understand a little bit more about the kind of that third point you mentioned about PMI, private mortgage insurance. So just talk through a little bit about, for people that maybe don't know much about that. So if you have less than 20% down, you're required to have that. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. So if you're doing a conventional loan and you're putting less than 20% down, you are required to have conventional private mortgage insurance in some form. And let me just back up and share a personal story with you. When I bought my first house, and this also ties in with point number two, Dave Ramsey is an advocate for always putting 20% down. And that's another really strong belief that I have that's not correct. If you have 20% down and you have the means to do that, and that's important to you, I'm not going to argue with you. Now where I'm at in my life, when I buy a property, I'm putting 20 to 25% down or more. So if someone has the means and the ability to do that, and that's part of their financial plan, then you're not going to get an argument for me. Where I'm concerned is that a lot of homeowners, especially first-time home buyers in 2023, as we move into 2024, they just don't have the means to do that with the cost of housing gone up as much as it has the last couple of years. It's just not a practical reality for most folks, and especially younger folks. The average age of a first-time home buyer in 2023 has been 34 years old. Now, when I bought my first home, I was 26, and at the time, I didn't have the ability to put 20% down. And, as a matter of fact, I had a difficult time scraping up 3.5%, which was around $4,500 at the time. And that was the first home that I bought. I put $4,500 down. And I love sharing this story because it's so powerful on why in some cases, you may not want to save or wait and save for the 20%. So in my example, I put $4,500 down on my first home. This was in Phoenix, Arizona, back in 2010, because that's all that I could afford. Um, and 5 years later, I sold that home. When I sold it, I netted $70,000 from the sale of that home in 2015. I then relocated back to Denver here, bought a property here in Denver, um, and reinvested that entire 70,000 as part of the down payment. Well, that home in Colorado now has appreciated substantially. So what started off as a $4,500 investment in 2010 has now literally turned into over $500,000 in equity. Now, how powerful is that?
That's
I
awesome.
invested $4,500 in 2010, which has turned into over 500,000 just 14 years later. And so that's the power of leverage, and that's why you may not want to wait to put 20% down. And I'm not someone who has the belief where, you need to go buy a property right now, and if you don't, you're missing out. My philosophy has always been, you need to do what's right for you. You need to evaluate the pros of purchasing a home right now and the cons. And, really you want to make sure that you're ready to jump in from an affordability perspective. But, if I was going to save for 20%, back in 2010, it probably would have taken me 4 or 5 years. And just think about how much home values would have increased during that time and the impact of interest rates during that time. I would have lost out on all of that equity and I would not be where I'm at today had I waited to try and put 20% down. So that's another big kind of argument that I have with Dave. And private mortgage insurance isn't the end of the world, especially with conventional. As soon as you hit that 80% mark in equity, either through principal pay down on the mortgage or um, equity appreciation on the property, you can get rid of the mortgage insurance. You can request for it to come off at any point. It'll come off automatically once the loan to value ratio hits 78% based off of the original appraised value. And another thing that Dave never mentions is that there are, 5, 6, 7 different ways to handle the mortgage insurance. One thing that's great about this market right now is that buyers have more leverage than they've had in years. And if you're a buyer, you can request the seller to pay for the private mortgage insurance through a seller credit. You can even finance it into the loan on a one-time lump sum basis, so you don't have to pay for it monthly. So there's really all these different ways. A lot of them are creative. You can get other people to pay for the mortgage insurance that Dave doesn't discusses, that he doesn't discuss. So again, I'm about options. I'm about information. I'm about flexibility, and there are a lot of different ways to handle that. And it shouldn't be something that you feel terrible about. Private mortgage insurance is not as bad as Dave and a lot of others make it sound.
So just maybe for some context, let's just say I'm buying a $500,000 home. I'm only putting, let's just say 5% down. What would just a ballpark, what would the private mortgage insurance be on a monthly basis on something like that? I mean, is it, $100? Is it $300? Do you have just kind of a rough?
Yeah, that's another great question, and to answer that, I can't really give you a specific dollar amount, but what I can tell you is that it's risk based. So unlike FHA is going to be a flat rate based off of the down payment, and in most cases, it's the mortgage insurance premiums are going to be on the payment for the life of the loan. So for FHA, you can't get rid of the mortgage insurance if you're putting less than 10% down. And a lot of times it's going to be higher on FHA than it is conventional. So conventional, it's risk based, meaning that it's based off of the individual's credit score. It's based off of their debt to income ratio. It's based off of occupancy, the amount of reserves they have, and there's several other qualifying factors. So the better qualified someone is, the lower their premiums are going to be. Down payment is also another factor. So that's what's so great. And not only that, you have all of these different ways to handle it. So you can pay for it monthly. You can finance it back into the loan. You can get the seller to pay for that. So a lot of lenders have the ability to also shop the mortgage insurance around. There's about 7 or 8 different companies that offer private mortgage insurance, and you can shop that around if you're a lender on behalf of your customer to make sure that they're getting the best possible rate and premium. So there's a lot more options, a lot more flexibility on how that's handled.
So I'm, considering buying a house in 2024, first time buyer, don't have a ton of cash saved up. Maybe I've, been slightly irresponsible in the past. My credit score is not, perfect. How realistic is it for somebody in that type of role to get a 3.5% down? I mean, is that realistic for people that aren't, up on this pedestal of having perfect credit? And, is it realistic for the average Joe to get a 3.5% down mortgage?
It is. And when you talk about 3.5% down, what I'm thinking of is more of an FHA loan. And the
Mm-hmm.
first home that I bought in 2010 was an FHA loan. It was a 3.5% down FHA loan, and the benefit of an FHA loan is that there's so much more flexibility from a credit score perspective. And so if your credit is not perfect, if it's in, the mid 600s, the low 600s, there are even some lenders out there that will go into the 500s. That can still be a great option. There's, FHA, it's a government backed loan. And so you can still get great financing terms and get approved even if you have less than perfect credit. And so it can be a great segue into homeownership for someone that doesn't have perfect credit. And then, like in my example, I was able to make that step with an FHA loan. I started building some equity. This is the one thing that I left out there. I bought my home in 2010. I sold it in 2015, but I actually did a refinance in 2012 after about 2 years. I got out of that FHA loan into a conventional loan. I got rid of that mortgage insurance. I dropped the payment down, and that's a very common strategy. And that's, if you can get into a conventional loan once you're ready, like you'll have that option. But an FHA loan is a great tool and a great way to become a homeowner, even if you have less than perfect credit. And let me ask you a question. I know that you were researching kind of some data here over the last couple days as far as net worth, and I love talking about net worth and how that relates to income and how that relates to just owning assets. But what did you find out as far as, what is the net worth of someone who rents compared to someone who's a homeowner?
Yes, I mean, it's pretty staggering when you just compare the two. So, and this was pulled fairly recently, so it might have changed slightly even since then. But, currently the average net worth of a renter is only about $10,400. The same net worth for an individual that is a homeowner is just shy of $400,000, 396,200. So, I mean, what a staggering, difference between those two. And like you were saying earlier, it's not something that everybody needs to be, buying just to buy. There's a right time for everybody.
Hmm.
However, if that's important to somebody, there's always a path available for them to get there. And whether or not they're buying today or 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 years from now, I mean, just as long as they at least have identified that as a goal of theirs, then they can, again, reverse engineer that to creating the ability for them to make it a reality. So
Hmm.
I think just with those numbers, that should be enough for pretty much everybody to see the value in home ownership and just the power of over time, just again, how much net worth is achieved just through owning real estate.
And just think
Um,
about that equity. I mean, your data, your research referenced nearly 400,000. Um, and think about what you can do with that. You can access that equity through a home equity line of credit. You can, use that to pay for your kids' college. You can leverage it and use that as a down payment on an investment property. You don't have to, but it just, when you have that equity, it just gives you more options. And that's another, you hear the Grant Cardones and the Robert Kiyosaki's of the world who say your home is not an asset. That's a big philosophy of theirs. Your home is not an asset. And that is why I strongly disagree with them, because your home is an asset. Your home is working for you. The reason they say that is because you're making a payment on that. But okay, so what if you don't own that home and you rent? Well, are you making a payment when you rent something? Yes, you are. So you're still going to have some type of housing expense, whether you own it or whether you rent. But if you own it, that property is working for you. It's building that equity, and then you have options to use that equity for other things or not. Just doing what you feel is in your best for your individual financial profile. And I was kind of staying on the same theme. You had asked me about someone that has less than perfect credit. If putting 3.5% down was realistic. What are some things that you're seeing on the real estate side, and what are tips that you have for folks that are aspiring home buyers? What would you suggest if someone's interested in purchasing a home, you know, in 2024, but they don't know what step to take or where to start? What are your thoughts there?
so yeah, without a doubt, I mean, it's a very overwhelming, just task of making that decision to buy a home, just all of these unknowns. They've obviously never done it before. So there's a lot of just words being thrown around, different fees, different expenses. Just there's a lot that's going into this that I think can make it pretty overwhelming for people. So my suggestion, first and foremost, is to just connect with a lender, somebody like yourself or just anybody else that they have gotten a good referral from somebody that they trust on, and just getting that pre-approval just to see what currently with their job, with their just current living situation, with what debts they have, credit cards, cars, all that kind of stuff. Just figuring out, what really they realistically they could afford, and more importantly, what they would feel comfortable paying on a monthly basis if they were to buy a home today. So let's just say, I've got a client that's, first time home buyer. They're really interested in buying a house. They, realize that, with their current situation, they could qualify for a mortgage up to $3,000 a month. That's maybe what they would feel comfortable paying
Hmm.
when they did buy a home. But right now they're a renter and they're paying $2,000 a month. Well, rather than just waiting until that day comes to start that $3,000 a month mortgage payment, just pretend like you own the house today.
Hmm.
Start paying that dollar amount today. So what I mean by that is start, $3,000 a month. That's now your living budget. Pay your $2,000 a month rent, but then take that additional $1,000 and just put it into an account that you're not going to touch, and basically just train your mind and your habit of now being able to, on a consistent basis, pay that amount that you're going to eventually need to pay without failure month after month after month. And just by doing that, you're going to not only just build up these extra reserves,
Yeah.
which can be used at the closing, whether it be, just unexpected costs that come up, or, without a doubt, you're always going to have, potentially some other expenses when you move into your new home. If you buy a new build home, for example, most likely you're going to have to put up window coverings. You might even have to buy a couple appliances, maybe some landscaping. There's different scenarios like that where you're going to have additional costs outside of just the mortgage when you're buying your home. So number one, you're just having that additional, reserves of cash available to do that. But more importantly, I think, is really just that concept of training your mind and being comfortable with that payment. So when that day comes, it's no sweat off your back. You've already been doing this, and it's just, another month, no change at all with that. So
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
that's really
that's
powerful.
I think that's excellent advice. And it's, what you're talking about is putting a plan together and being disciplined. And the mistake that I see with a lot of first time home buyers in particular is that they get too emotional. They're not even thinking about buying, and all of a sudden they go to an open house and like they want to go buy that without having put any thought into that. So I'm a really big believer in putting a plan together, being disciplined, staying committed to the plan. And when you can separate your emotions, when you can look at a home as not just a place that you live, but really understand and realize that there is this other financial component and that it is an investment. Like you said, are you comfortable with the payment? Um, is it, from an affordability perspective, is it in line with your goals? Have you considered some of those other possible costs? Putting that plan together, thinking through things, not being emotional in your decision, and being disciplined in your actions. That is how you win with mortgage and real estate.
And just one last topic, or one last point on that topic. There's a good chance that just going through this pre-approval process, most likely you're going to identify, kind of the cold, hard truth of some certain areas of your personal finances that maybe aren't aligned with, being a savvy, financially, sound individual. As an example, you've talked to me several times about just what the average American's car payment is. I think you said it was over $700. So just, as an example, you do this pre-approval and you start identifying things like this, and it might be enough of a realization to, in order to pay this $3,000 a month, we need to, do one of two things. We either need to learn how we can make more money, or we need
Mhm.
to figure out how we can save more money. And, it's a pretty common, just saying, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. And I think by going through that pre-approval process, you're at least identifying, some areas that, most likely almost everybody has some areas that they can improve on with that. And that's just a great way to get a head start on that and be a lot more poised when that day comes.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. It's so true. It really isn't about how much you make. It's about how much you keep. I've worked with individuals that are making two, three, $400,000 a year, but they're broke. They're still living paycheck to paycheck because every time they get a raise or an increase in income, they go add another liability. They go upgrade their car, or they go buy the RV, and they finance a lot of this stuff. And so that's why it's so important to have a plan, like you were talking about earlier. What is your vision this year, next year, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road? When do you want to retire? What type of life do you want to have in retirement? Are you willing to make sacrifices today, right now, so you can live a better life that is more secure tomorrow? And so these are all great points, and these are things that I think about in my own life. And I'm making sacrifices right now. I'm keeping my monthly obligations as low as I can. I really try and avoid bad debt and make sure that the only things I am financing are assets that are going up in value and are going to pay me every month. Because I want to get to a spot to where, if I want to work, great. If I want to move on to my next passion projects, I want to be able to have the means to do that.
Yeah, that's very inspiring. I think one thing I've really looked up to with you is over the last few years, as you're growing your investment portfolio with rental properties, instead of upgrading your car, which you obviously, could have done several times over at this point, but instead of doing that, you're taking that same amount of extra cash, extra money that you have, and you're putting it towards another investment where it's basically forcing you to be, structured and not spend frivolously.
Mhm.
You're kind of forcing your hand by reinvesting that money into another, rental property where you don't have the ability to have that, extra money kind of burning a hole in your pocket and then eventually caving and spending it on something that's, could have been better spent somewhere else.
Yeah, it's all part of the plan and the vision. And this is another thing that I say is that wealth, it's not about it's what wealth is, it's a mindset. It's not about, how much money you make. It's a wealth mindset. What is your vision? Are you someone that has a wealthy mindset? Do you live from a foundation of abundance or scarcity? Do you look at challenges as opportunities or difficulties? And it's developing the capacity to receive things into your life.
Man, very well said. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that a couple times myself after we release this episode. That was great. Well, I think every time we do one of these, there's 3 or 4 topics that I know I want to dive deeper into. But I think we can probably save some of those for another day. One of those, just as a teaser, that's pretty relevant to this is, the FHA recently updated some of their guidelines where for a rental property or a income producing property, for it to be considered a residential income producing property, that is referring to any building, any investment that's up to 4 units. So once you get up to 5 units and greater, that's a whole separate discussion. It's considered a commercial property at that point. You're going to be going through some different options when it comes to the financing of that project or that property. But for the 1 to 4 units, before that was almost always a 20% down requirement, and the FHA has updated that to as low as 5% down. So maybe you can just kind of share a little bit on that. And the reasoning for why I wanted to bring that up is if you are in a position where you don't have maybe a ton of extra cash for that down payment, or maybe you just have a position that or wherever you work, you love your job and you're very content and happy with where you're at with that. You don't want to go looking for another way to make more money, or, there's creative ways to make this happen. And one of those being buying something like a 4 unit, living in 1 unit, and then renting out the other 3 and having that cover your entire mortgage, if not even some extra cash on top of that.
Yeah, it really is so powerful. And the update, just to clarify, was on the conventional side of things.
Oh, excuse me. Okay.
FHA has, they have that program as well, but now it's available on conventional loans as well. But I mean, think about that. You can go buy a 4-unit property with as little as 5% down, and you would occupy 1 unit, and then you would have 3 sources of revenue from the other 3 units, to not only pay for the unit that you're in, but pay for the mortgage payment and a lot of the expenses, and possibly even have some additional cash flow. So again, it's just another option, and it's something that in the right market, and if the rents make sense, it can be really, really powerful. And I'm very big on, let's just see, what are the rents? What would the mortgage payment look like? What did the financing terms look like? Is this going to make sense? But knowing that it's now available as an option, options are never a bad thing. We have the option to do that and put 5% down. And so it's great to have that in the tool belt, and really exciting that it's now an option with conventional financing.
I think that's one of the things that I love the most about real estate, and I just really get excited about, is how there are so many different ways to be successful in real estate.
Yeah.
It's not this one path. Everybody has a different path if they want to take it. There's just so much creativity that can be done when it comes to real estate. And the other one that we'll talk through this on another episode as well, but that I've kind of seen firsthand, more so with my parents and just my kind of life growing up is the concept of forced appreciation,
Hmm.
just meaning that you're buying a house that has some opportunities to add value to it. So, for example, buying a home that has an unfinished basement, or maybe it's, a bit older and it could use some updating. Looking for opportunities and creative ways such as those, where you're buying a home that's not your perfect dream home, but you have the ability to do some, get your hands dirty and do some sweat equity. And that's just one other way to add value to the house, get it refinanced after doing so, and get even more equity that way. And also, I feel like that's a way where, as opposed to other forms of investments, you have the ability to have a little bit more control over your investment. If you're willing
Yeah.
to put in the work, you can minimize your risk through, some of these projects with, value add, and forced appreciation.
Hmm. Yeah, those are all incredible points, and I feel the same way. There's so many different ways to win at real estate, but you got to have a plan, and you got to have a vision, and you need to be disciplined, and you need to stay committed. And if you have a long-term outlook, you know, it's that's a big part of the winning formula. And so if you don't need to go sell, and you're not looking to, necessarily pull that equity out as soon as you can, unless it's for the right things and the right reasons. If you have a long-term outlook, it's really difficult to lose at real estate.
Yeah, I released a video recently and just using kind of the quote of, don't wait to buy real estate and wait. So as long as you just
Yeah.
have that concept, really a good foundation of understanding that, and that doesn't necessarily mean you have to hold on to it forever. Some people do, some people don't. There's different strategies with that, but just understanding that the biggest power within real estate is in the long term. It's not a short term get rich quick. It's not going out and buying Bitcoin or, some of these other short-term successes that you occasionally hear about.
Mhm.
The majority of wealth that's created through real estate is in the long term.
That's right. That's right.
So, well, I think we dropped a few different bombs today, a few different good nuggets of info. I think we could probably leave it with that for today. But Ben, before we close out, just want to hear a little bit about, obviously we got New Year's coming up. Are you doing anything fun for New Year's? What do you got going on in the next few days?
I think we're gonna have a pretty chill New Year's. May go see a movie. New Year's Day falls on a Monday, so it'll be nice kind of having an extended weekend. But really just trying to spend time with family and enjoy my personal time from a position of rest a little bit more, but also, like we talked about last week, staying motivated, staying accountable, getting those things done that are important to me, like working out with you, going for my runs, doing my reading, reading my devotional, and staying on top of the things that I need to get done. So, how about yourself?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. Going up to Grand Lake, spending a couple days up there this weekend. That's always a fun spot to be for New Year's. They shoot fireworks out over the lake, and hopefully it won't be too cold. It seems like Denver's supposed to be like in the 50s the next couple days, so just a crazy winter we're having as far as pretty mellow. I'm enjoying that.
Yeah, that's been great.
One last thing I'll close out with, I thought was really just cool to hear is, so your daughter has been running. Obviously, you have a lot of running in your family and your background, but how many days now is Nitia ran in a row? Hopefully, I didn't jinx this. Hopefully, she ran yesterday since we talked about this.
Yeah, she did get her run in last night. We went for a 2.5 mile run together. She started her streak on August 4th. So September, October, November, December, coming up on January here. So on January 4th, it'll be 5 months, or about 150 days here in the next week.
And I bring that up because I know last week we've been talking about habits and just how important it is to find an accountability partner, whether it be somebody in the gym, if you're trying to get, improve on your fitness, whatever it may be. But I was just thinking about this after you told me that, is for people that are maybe a mother or father and they have children that are at an age old enough where they can be active as well. That's what a great accountability partner, even within your children. Yeah, maybe they don't have the same goals as you, but for example, incentivizing in some way, like I know with your daughter, you said you give her a new pair of tennis shoes for every 30 days that she
Mhm.
completes in a row. But by having some sort of an incentive for your kids, that's going to motivate them to want to keep doing it every single day or whatever the goal is. But it's just, again, another accountability partner in a sense, because maybe you just commit to doing it with them. So if your daughter's motivated and has to get her run in today, even though, it's crummy weather out, it's kind of in a way also your accountability partner. So just wanted to throw that out there, guys. If you're having a hard time, because I know it's really difficult to find an accountability partner when it comes to fitness, and somebody that's got the same goals as you and is going to be actually committed and showing up day after day after day. That's a really hard person to find for a lot of people. And if you're not fortunate enough to find that person, just consider that, get creative. Maybe it's your kids that can kind of both benefit. You can benefit one another somehow. So just
Yeah,
want to throw that
and
out
for
there.
us, it's also a great way to have some family time together where we can, and my son, he runs too, and the three of us will go out for runs a lot, and it's just a fun way to develop healthy habits and get some really quality family time. And this is something that I always say, it's not just about the running. I mean, the running does have incredible benefits for health, but it's, one thing I always tell them, it's developing the habit of learning how to stay committed, of learning how to be disciplined, and learning how to put the work in. And running a lot of times is not always fun. Like last night, we went for a run and it was about 20 degrees out, pitch black. I didn't want to go run in the dark, with it being 20 degrees out. And I don't know that she did either, but it's just learning to walk through the fires and learning to be disciplined and accountable. And if you can master that with something like running, you can then apply it to all these other areas of your life. It's a skill of facing adversity, being disciplined. That is the skill that we're really going after. Let's master it here and then, use it in all these other areas of our life.
When I was doing 75 hard, we had a few spells of bad weather during that. We'll talk through 75 hard on a different episode, but part of that was also doing a daily outdoor workout. And on those days when it was crummy out and cold and dark and windy, when I still made the effort to get out and do that, it was also a really great way to build self-confidence, because kind of going back to that concept of our episode last week on separation season, you're out there, nobody else is out there, and you just realize that, I'm doing something that others aren't. I'm willing to do something that others aren't. And it just gives you a little bit more self-confidence than you had the day before, because you're making that effort despite the weather or whatever the environment is that you're up against.
Yeah, yeah. And these, when you go through the fire and when you walk through the weeds, that is where the lessons are learned.
I like that. Man, you're dropping some nuggets today, buddy. All right. Well, guys, hope you enjoyed this one. I think we went through a lot of really practical tips. Obviously, Ben has a ton of knowledge when it comes to the mortgage related insights. So really appreciate all that info that you shared with us today. Hopefully, Dave Ramsey's team doesn't find our podcast and take it down. So for all you viewers and listeners out there, hopefully you're listening to this and we haven't been 86th from Spotify and all the other podcast channels that we're on.
And for the
But
record,
Ben,
I love Dave. I think he's right for most Americans. I think America needs Dave. That's what I said. America needs Dave. It's my opinion that when it comes to mortgage, he's wrong.
and I think that was very well said. Cool, man. Well, any parting words, Ben?
I appreciate all that you're doing. Thank you for holding us accountable, and let's stay at it and let's attack 2024 the best we can.
Absolutely. And guys, if you have any, just ideas for episodes, questions, more specific topics that you'd like for us to maybe dig deeper into, feel free to leave a comment below. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, also, please make sure you guys are liking and subscribing. We're going to be releasing videos every single week. We want you guys to be the first to be notified of those. And we really want to be as engaging as possible with our audience. So again, if you have questions, if you have any feedback, comments, just anything you want us to ever dive deeper in, please reach out to us. If you have our info, contact us directly, or again, just leave us a comment and we'll make sure to respond to those and take that into consideration for future episodes. So
all the best. Happy
all right,
2024, guys. And we'll talk to you next week.
Yep. Happy New Year. Talk to you guys next week. Bye.